Chapter 2. I came into this world as the only begotten daughter. Mother of Peace. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. Chapter 2 Part 1. A tree with deep roots. When I gently closed my eyes and listened to the harsh winds blowing through the cornfield, it sounded like thousands of horses running in the wilderness. It captured the dynamic spirit of Goguryeo knights galloping powerfully across the continent. At other times, if I listened quietly, I would hear another kind of sound, the affectionate whoo. Whoo. Of scops owls in the high branches of trees deep in the mountains. I remember the summer nights when I fell asleep holding my mother's hand, with the sound of hooting owls echoing in my ears. More than 70 years have passed, but the beautiful scenery and soothing sounds of Anjou remain in my heart. My hometown holds many beautiful memories for me, and I want to go back there. One day I will certainly return home. When I was born, my father, Han Sung-un, had a dreamlike vision. He saw bright sunlight beaming into a thick grove of pine trees. The light fell on two cranes that were dancing together in harmonious affection. He decided to name me Hakja, which means crane child. I am a member of the Han clan of Cheongju in North Chungcheong Province, the clan's historical birthplace. Chungcheong means center of the heart that is pure and clear, and Cheongju means clear village. When the water in a river or the sea is clear, one can see the fish swimming all the way to the bottom. Living in the pure and clear environment of Cheongju, I could see the bright spirits of my pure and humble ancestors. The Chinese character for my family name, Han, has various meanings. It can mean one, symbolizing God. It also can mean big, as in large enough to embrace all created things in the universe, and full, meaning overflowing abundance. The founding father of the Han clan, Han Lan, was honored as a loyal patriot of the Kingdom of Goryeo. The King of Korea would recognize persons of civic virtue and reward them with land and a perennial stipend. The court recorded their names in a book of honor, and there is an entry for Han Lan. Han Lan's story is this: he built a bureau for agricultural administration in a district of Cheongju called Bangseo Dong and turned a large expanse of land into productive farmland. When a war between Korean rulers broke out, Wang Jian, a nobleman and military general, passed through Cheongju on his way to do battle with Jian Fen, the king of Hubekje. Han Lan greeted Wang Jian, fed his army of 100,000 soldiers, and joined him on the battlefield. Once Wang Jian became king, he declared Han Lan a loyal patriot. Han Lan's reputation as a founding contributor to the kingdom has endured through the ages. 33 generations after Han Lan, I was born of his lineage. The numbers 3 and 33 are significant. Jesus asked 3 disciples to pray with him in Gethsemane. He prophesied that Peter would betray him 3 times before the cock crowed. Rejected of men, Jesus was crucified at the age of 33, yet he promised to return. He was one of 3 who were crucified on that day, to one of whom he said, "Today you will be with me in paradise." On the 3rd day, Jesus rose from the grave. The number 3 signifies heaven, earth and humankind. It signifies the perfect fulfillment of both heavenly law and natural law. The Korean people are descended from the Dong-yi race, a wise people who studied the stars and were able to ascertain heavenly fortune. Koreans developed a prosperous agriculture-based culture, worshipped God and loved peace from the time before Christ. The Dong-yi people established kingdoms based on the name Han. Some people, including my husband, cite records that show that the Han people predate the Gojoseon era, which is considered to be the first Korean kingdom. Korea's founding legend, called the Daemun legend, says we were chosen as the descendants of heaven according to the deep will of God. Our people are also called the Betel race. The Chinese characters for Bei and Dallae signify brightness and brilliance. That attribution recognizes our reverence for God and love of peace and serenity. To this day, Korea is known as the land of the morning calm. Still, the Korean people's 5,000-year history is filled with deep sorrow. Foreign powers constantly marched through Korea, trampling us like wild grass and leaving us stripped like the bare branches of a tree in the coldest of winters. But we never lost our roots. We overcame foreign invasions with wisdom and patience and survived as a nation, and of this we are proud. One cannot help but wonder why God allowed this people to suffer such great hardships. I believe it was to prepare a people to whom He could entrust a great mission. We learn from the Bible that God's chosen people always endure great adversity. On the foundation of Noah, Abraham, and other providential figures, God prepared the people of Israel as the ones to whom He could send the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Facing rejection, God had to allow Jesus to suffer great trials and hardship, and to finally offer His life on the cross. 2,000 years later, God chose the Korean people and entrusted to them His only begotten Son and only begotten daughter, the ones who can receive God's first love. God needed a man and a woman who could endure suffering and rejection while continuing to forgive and love all people, thus revealing God's heart of parental love. So too, God needed a nation capable of enduring suffering for the sake of all nations. God prepared the Korean people for this. Many peoples have suffered and disappeared from history, but the Koreans endured. Thus God entrusted this people with a noble mission. The end of Chapter 2, Part 1. A tree with deep roots. Mother of Peace. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. Chapter 2, Part 2. As a hen embraces her brood. When I was born, earth was groaning with anguish as a battleground in which people shed each other's blood. People dwelled in extreme confusion and darkness and heartlessly exploited each other. As part of this wretched mosaic, the Korean peninsula suffered indescribable torment under a Japanese occupation that lasted 40 years, from the 1905 Oil-Sinong-yak, a protectorate treaty between Korea and Japan, until our liberation in 1945. I was born during that period of oppression. I was born in 1943 in Onju, South Pyongan province of what is now North Korea, at 4:30 a.m. on February 10th of the solar calendar and the 6th day of the first lunar month of that year. I remember clearly the address of my home, 26, Sinui Ri Onju Up, which has been renamed Chilsongdong, in what is now the city of Onju. My home was not far from the center of the village, and the surrounding neighborhood had a very warm and cozy feeling, as if we were chicks cuddled under a mother hen. Unlike the thatched roof houses nearby, my house had a tile roof and a big front porch. Behind it rose a small, verdant hill covered with chestnut and pine trees. Beautiful flowers bloomed and colorful leaves fell with the rhythm of the seasons, and I heard every kind of bird singing and chirping together. When spring warmed the earth, yellow forsythias smiled brightly between the fences, and azaleas bloomed red on the hill. A small stream flowed through our village, and, except when it froze solid in midwinter, I could always hear the laughing sound of the water. I grew up enjoying the happy sounds of the birds in the stream, as if they were a choir of nature. Even now, thinking of life in my hometown is like snuggling into a cozy and heartwarming mother's embrace. This memory brings tears to my eyes. Between our house and the hill, we had a small cornfield. When the corn was ripe, the husks would crack and yellow kernels of corn would appear through the long, silky hair. My mother would boil the ripened corn, put a generous number of cobs in a bamboo basket, and call our neighbors to come and eat. They would come into our house through the gate built from sticks, sit in a circle on our porch and eat cobs of corn with us. I remember wondering why their faces did not look very bright, even though they were gratefully eating a delicious meal. Thinking about it years later, I realized these people were impoverished due to the severe exploitation of the occupying government. I would squeeze in between the grown-ups and try to eat the kernels off a small cob of corn, but, as a small child, I was never successful. Noticing me, my mother would smile gently, break off some yellow kernels from her cob and put them into my mouth. I remember the sweet corn kernels rolling around in my mouth as if it were yesterday. The end of Chapter 2, Part 2. As a hen embraces her brood. Mother of Peace. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. Chapter 2, Part 3. The Dallae Bridge Legend. Mother, why is where we live called Pyongyang Province? I was full of curiosity, and whenever I had a question about something, I ran to my mother and asked her for the answer. Every time my mother responded kindly. Well, dear, she replied, it is called that because the Pyong part is the first character of Pyongyang and the An part is the first character of Anju. Why do they take one character from each name? I asked. It's because both of them are big districts, she said. Over time, Anju had grown into a large town. It was surrounded by expansive plains that were ideal for farming, and there was normally plenty to eat. My father, Han Sung-nun, was born on January 20, 1909. He was the eldest of 5 children of Han Byong-gon and Choi Ki-byong of the Cheongju Han clan at Yonghyun village, by the city of Anju. My father entered Mansong Public Primary School in 1919, when he was 10. He had to leave after finishing the 4th grade, but his desire to learn led him to enter a private school, Yukyong School, in 1923, from which he graduated in 1925 at age 16. He then became a teacher at his alma mater, Yukyong School, for 10 years. During the chaotic period from Korea's liberation until 1946, he served as the vice principal of his other alma mater, Mansong Primary School. I lived with my father for only a brief time, but his gentle nature and features are engraved in my mind. He was meticulous and thrifty, and he was very strong. One day he was out for a stroll on a local road, when he saw some people struggling to clear a big rock from a rice field. He went over, lifted up the rock and moved it out of the way. He was a devout Christian and follower of Reverend Lee Yong-do, pastor of the New Jesus Church. Because of my father's work as a teacher and his active life of faith, he was rarely at home. He lived a life of service to God, even though the government tracked and persecuted Christians from independent churches such as his. My mother, Hong Soon-ae, was born on March 18, 1914, in Cheongju, North Pyongyang Province. That is the town where my husband, Father Moon, also was born. She and her younger brother, my uncle, were born to a devout Christian couple, Hong Yu-il and Jo Won-mo. My maternal grandmother, Jo Won-mo, was a direct descendant of Jo Han-jun, a wealthy scholar of the Joseon dynasty. Jo Han-jun lived in a village of tiled-roofed houses in Cheongju, a community of people who held government positions. Not far from his home was a bridge across the Dallae River. It once was a sturdy bridge made of neatly piled, large stones, but over time it had deteriorated to the point that no one could cross it. No one had the time or resources to fix the bridge, and one day a flood swept it away and buried its stones in the riverbed. As did everyone else, Jo Han-jun knew the prophecy that had been passed down for generations. If a rock carved like a totem pole standing beside the Dallae River Bridge is buried, then the nation of Korea will fall, but if that rock is clearly exposed to the people, then a new heaven and earth will unfold in Korea. The Dallae River Bridge was important for another reason. In order for Chinese envoys to make their annual trek to the seat of Korea's government in Seoul, then named Hanyang, they had to cross that bridge. Now it was gone, and the government did not have money to rebuild it. In desperation, officials posted a bulletin calling upon the citizens to rebuild the bridge. Grandfather Jo Han-jun accepted the call and rebuilt the bridge using his personal wealth. The sturdy new stone bridge was now high enough for boats to pass under. Grandfather Jo Han-jun spent his entire fortune on this task, and when it was done, all he had left were 3 brass coins. These were just enough to pay for the new straw sandals that he needed, in order to properly attend the bridge dedication ceremony the next day. That night, he had a dream of a grandfather in white clothes who came to him and said, Han-jun, Han-jun, your sincere devotion has moved heaven. I was expecting to send a son of heaven to your family. However, because you bought the sandals, I will send to your family the princess of heaven. Grandfather Jo Han-jun awoke from that dream, and found that a stone statue of Maitreya Buddha suddenly had appeared near the bridge. Over the years, this miracle created such an atmosphere, that all those who passed, that Buddha would get off their horses, to offer a bow before proceeding on their way. The people of the village marveled at this sign from God, and built a shelter over the statue, so that it would not be exposed to rain or wind. On this foundation of devotion and loyalty, generations later, in the family line of Jo Han Jun, God sent my maternal grandmother, Jo Won Mo. We three women, grandmother Jo Won Mo, her daughter, my mother, and I, all had a very deep Christian faith. We were also the only daughters born into our families over 3 generations. The providence to bring about the birth of God's only begotten daughter on the Korean peninsula was based upon countless conditions of devotion that started long ago with my ancestors Han Lan and Jo Han Jun, and continued through the generations to this time. The end of Chapter 2 Part 3. The Dallae Bridge Legend. Mother of Peace. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. Chapter 2 Part 4. God is your Father. My sweet child, shall we go to church? When I heard those words, I would run to my mother. She would take my hand in hers, and we would walk to church. I think the long walk with my mother was why I liked going to church. One Sunday, as we arrived back at our village after church, my mother stopped in her tracks. She plucked a wildflower blooming shyly on the roadside and tucked it into my hair, right behind the ear. She kissed my cheek and whispered to me with a delicate, loving voice, "How pretty you look, my one and only daughter of the Lord." Mother's eyes always looked the same. They were clear and deep, almost as if her irises were one with the blue sky. As I returned her gaze, I could glimpse traces of tears, but, not knowing her deep heart, I was only excited and delighted by the words, "one and only daughter of the Lord." Mother often called me precious daughter of the Lord with emphasis, as if she were praying. Throughout her life, this was the term that she used when she prayed for me, her only daughter. In this way, I grew up feeling honored that I was the daughter of God, the daughter of the Lord. My maternal grandmother, Jo Won Mo, also looked into my eyes and told me clearly, "God is your Father." Because of that, whenever I heard the word Father, my heart would burst in my chest. For me, the word Father brought to mind not my own father, but our Heavenly Father. Because of such love in my home, I never worried about my life. Despite our poverty, and despite my father not being with us, I always was content. This was because I knew that God was my Father, that He was my reason for being alive, and that He was always right there by my side, taking care of me. I sensed that God was my real parent from the moment of my birth. I realize now that I had a sensitive spiritual intuition. My husband recognized this in me, and complimented me for my insight into things that were taking place. He did so sometimes during his talks to members. My grandmother and mother taught me the duties of heavenly love, and not to obsess over what I was going through personally. They set the example for me, obeying God absolutely and wholeheartedly. For Him, they did not mind carrying out exhausting endeavors that seemed to melt their very bone marrow. They offered their devotions of prayer most earnestly and carefully, almost as if they were building a tall stone tower. They also made other extraordinary conditions that I didn't fully understand. They would bow before Jesus hundreds and even thousands of times in a day. They cooked meals for Jesus and sewed clothes for Him, as if He were living in our house with us, and then they did the same for the Lord, whom they expected to return to Korea. They shared their faith with everyone they met, and their meager food and resources with anyone who needed it. Their generous and happy spirits moved me, and shaped my character as I grew up. Several times a day, I would stand at the edge of our front porch and look up at the clear sky. It was astonishing how often I saw 3 or 4 beautiful cranes in flight. I would continue my gaze at the sky, even after the cranes were out of sight, my arms wrapped tightly around my chest to contain my heart, which I felt was about to burst out of me, and join the cranes in the heavens. One day, out of the blue, my mother asked me, "Do you know how you cried when you were born?" I was a little baby, I replied, so I must have cried, "Wah." "No, you didn't," she said. "You cried, la 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 la, as if you were singing." Your grandmother said, "Perhaps this child is going to grow up to become a musician." I engraved her words in my heart, for I thought they might symbolize my future. However, my mother was not done telling me about my infancy. She said that after she ate her first bowl of seaweed soup, the traditional meal for a mother after childbirth, she cradled me in her arms and fell asleep. As she dreamed, she saw Satan, a monstrous demon, appear before her. He shouted so loudly that even the mountains and streams rang with his fearsome voice. "If I let this baby be, the world will be in danger," he yelled. "I must do away with her right now." Suddenly he made as if to strike me. My mother held me closely and cast upon him all her energy to declare his defeat. "Satan, be gone at once," she said fiercely. "How dare you try to hurt her, when she is the most precious child to heaven? I cast you out in the name of the Lord. Get out of my presence. You have no right to be here. Heaven has claimed this child and your days of power have come to an end." Mother was shouting so loudly that my grandmother rushed into the room and shook her. She collected herself, looked deeply into my face, and searched her heart for the reason Satan was trying to strike me. She took this experience as a sign that I was destined to strike the head of the serpent. And this was the answer to her and my grandmother's prayers. "I must raise this child with complete devotion," my mother vowed to herself. "I will raise her to become a pure and beautiful girl for the Lord, and protect her from the pollution of the secular world." About a month later, she had another dream. This time, a heavenly angel dressed in shimmering white came to her on a sunlit cloud. "Soon, the angel spoke, I am sure you must feel incapable to prepare this baby for the service that our Heavenly Father has in mind, but don't be. This baby is the daughter of the Lord and you are her nanny. Please devote all your energies to raising her with absolute faith, love and obedience." Satan, however, did not give up. Until we left North Korea, he would appear in Mother's dreams, looking hideous and voicing threats both dramatic and subtle. Mother fought hard to protect me over a number of years. When I heard about these dreams from my mother, I became very serious. Why was Satan trying to hurt me? And why did he keep stalking me? I wondered.